Yes, hello, it's Joe here for Joyrider TV, live coming to you from Vasiliki on the Greek island of Lefkos, where it is actually some champagne sailing conditions right now. But unfortunately, I haven't got a boat available. Yeah, very exciting times at Joyrider TV, because this time next week, I will be in South Africa. Oh, yes. I will be in Langebaan, just to the north of Cape Town. So if you're about, give us a wave. And if you're down there with a boat, perhaps we can film a little bit for Show Us Your Cat, and that would be very nice indeed. If you're watching right now, if you could just stick something in the live chat just to let me know that everything is as it should be, that would be ideal. Thank you very much for that in advance, and let me know where it is that you are coming from. Let's just make sure we're all right. Apologies. Yeah, we're okay. All right. Okay, so I'd just like to start off this week by thanking everybody for their continued support of Joyrider TV. As you may be aware, the two best ways of supporting Joyrider TV is, one, if you want to get something back which you can actually wear, head over to totaljoyrider.com. And if you're not so worried about getting anything extra back, but you just really appreciate what it is that I'm doing over here, then Patreon is an excellent way of supporting the channel. Thanks to everybody who supports the channel through Patreon. On Patreon, what you do is you can choose how much you want to effectively sponsor the channel, and you can either make a monthly or yearly donation, which you can cancel at any time. So if you do want to get involved, the more people who get involved, it means I'll get to do more stuff. One thing that happened to me this week is my favorite camera mount, which I haven't used that much lately. Let's say this was the Delkin Fat Gecko camera mount. It was actually a present from my brother many moons ago, and I didn't wash it as much as I should. So I thought, right, I'm going to take it to bits and then soak it in the vinegar to really clean it up, which struck me as quite a good idea. And it came up quite nicely. Here are various of the other bits which basically clamp together thus. And long story short, it's broken, never to return back to active service. So that's the sort of thing that the funds from Patreon go to: getting new innovative mounting solutions, keeping the camera gear running. These GoPro batteries don't seem to last as well as you might expect. So there you go. Thanks very much to everybody. So we've got Ryan on board in Maui. Great to have you with us, Ryan. We have got Scott dropping it in the slot. Hello, Scott. And then we've got Laura in Santa Cruz. Thanks for coming, Laura. Hopefully we'll be having a feature from Fleet 240 Santa Cruz coming up in an upcoming episode of Show Us Your Cat, where I think there's some quite interesting things going on. We've got Ollie Smith beaming in from Canada, where he's enjoying a ski or snowboard season there. He's one of the key instructors on the Wildwind Beach, and he's looking forward to some champagne sailing this summer. I can only imagine that after spending a certain amount of time in the snow, getting back to a bit of wearing your shorts and flip-flops, getting out on the water every day. If it gets a bit hot, you go for a swim, that kind of thing. The appeal of that has got to be gradually growing throughout. All right, Ryan says, good morning, Joyrider community. It's 5:30 a.m. here in Maui. Okay, 10 out of 10 for dedication to Ryan. I'm sure he's up at that time of day anyway, but thanks for tuning in, Ryan. All right, so we've got Office Hands Dave on board. Yes, we have. Hello, Dave. Great to have you with us. Short story, long. Yeah, exactly. All right, we've got Lee in Macon, Georgia. Hey, Joe and Joyriders from Lake Tobaski. Yeah, there we are. All right, we've got Fisherman. Hello, Joseph, you're so chill. And a legend in my sailing club. That's nice to know. Very good. What country are you in, Fisherman? Let us know. I don't think we've heard from you so much before. Right, we've got Stephen there, blowing dogs off chains in the UK. I believe Stephen is Grafham Water, where I used to work before I started working in Greece. Lovely, great big pond in fairly central England. Lots of space, quite a steady wind. But at the moment, of course, the UK especially is being absolutely battered by the most wind they've had there for a long time, like in excess of 100 miles per hour in places. So make sure your mast is down. Trampoline off can help as well. And make sure that bad boy is strapped to the floor. And that's even if you're keeping it in your garage. There we are. All right. So as usual, I have got a few preloaded questions lined up. So if you are watching this later on and you weren't able to join us for the live session, you can ask your questions in the comment section below, and then I will come back to your questions in next week's session. So I think we'll steam in with the first question who comes. Oh yeah, this is one that we didn't quite have time for last week. This is from Willis, who says, oh my word, he's having trouble getting the springs into the rudders under the cams. Any tricks? Yeah, there's a process. So I'd like to draw a picture if I may. How does this look? Let's draw a line there. A bit of a line there. First person to get what it's going to be. I think you can tell by what the question was. All right, so that goes like that. That goes like that. There's a hole there. Yes, that's right. It's a lower casting rudder stock. And this shape would be for a Hobie 14, Hobie 16, Hobie Dragoon, to name but three. And then we have got, which way round would this be? This is looks like a chicken, just having a poke down there. Okay, the drawing isn't very good, actually, to be fair. But anyway, so what we've got, this is the cam, which would be like this, with the hole in the middle where the pin goes through. Under the cam, we have what is effectively a cam follower, which is called by hobiecat, it's called a plunger. Are we all there so far? I hope so. And then this is all going on inside the rudder casting. And then onto that plunger, we have a spring which goes down here. This is quite clearly not to scale. The spring is a really nice tight spring. And then under the spring, we have a screw. All right, so just to recap for those at the back, what everything does here is the cam locates into the cam stop plate, or as I've been corrected the older boats don't have a cam stop plate. They have a bar that basically sits in there, and that's what holds the rudder down. So under the cam will flip down into this position when the rudder's down. When the rudder's up, that's when the cam goes into the other position. This whole arrangement here is to put tension on the cam to prevent it from rotating too freely. So we can have it tighter if we want the rudder so it's not going to come up as easily, or a bit looser if we want the rudder to easily be able to lift the rudders. Like, for example, if you were racing a 16 in light winds and you want to sail with one rudder at all times, when you tack or jibe, having looser cams is going to make it much easier to pull the rudder up, get the other one down. Lovely. So that's all adjusted by this spring, and then the screw is what we adjust the tension on there. I think it's actually Michelle who's there in the live chat who was we were talking a bit of rudder cams earlier on in the week. I think could be wrong. So if you're having difficulty getting the spring in, then it's because it's not actually that easy. But what you want to do, the order of which you want to do, is trying to put the spring in when the cam is already in position is extremely difficult. And it's quite a painful operation. So what I would do is I would definitely take the cam out if your cam is in, by just knocking the pin out with a, I usually use a screwdriver with the end cut off, but anything that's the right size, just knock it out, and then insert all of the parts on the inside. That is going to be much easier. It's very important to make sure that the plunger, let's just draw a slightly different view. I hope everybody loves a bit of rudder, because that is definitely what we are into. Okay, this is looking straight down the system, let's call it. So the plunger, you'll just have the tip of the plunger sticking out here. And what, and if we just draw what's going on inside, then it's like that. Here's the spring. And then there's the screw. That's probably a slightly clearer picture. And then the cam will go in this space here. So what you need to do first, before you start installing all of the bits, is make sure that your plunger can easily go up and down in this space. If it can't easily go up and down in this space, like there is a bit of a tolerance in the manufacture of both the rudder casting and the plunger, then what you might need to do is take some sandpaper or file and just flatten off the sides of the plunger just a little bit. That's a bit extreme as how it would actually look, so that it can definitely move up and down freely. If it's sort of jamming on the side of the casting there, it's not going to work properly. So you do need to give it a little bit of attention there. Once you're happy with the plunger, what I would do is pop that bad boy out, put the plunger on the end of the spring, and then with a screwdriver, hold your rudder stock, stick it all in so the plunger comes out, and then maybe with something like maybe put the casting in a vise or something, or some way you can support it, and then get the screw on the end of the screwdriver. And this can take a few goes to actually line it up, but get it in there, get a few turns, like 3 or 4 turns on the screw, So if this is where the screw goes in, so you've got about that much screw in, and at least half of the screw, maybe a bit more, still out of the thread. That is as loose as you want to have it. And then once you've got that, once you're there, then put the cam in. So as we've seen in the change your rudder cam video and others like it, to get the rudder cam in, get the cam in this inverted position, push it down on the plunger, then stick something through the hole. I would stick my screwdriver through the hole, and then that's going to hold it. And then from the other side, put it on your work surface and start tapping the pin in, just making sure that that's all running sweet there. And then that will do it. And then once the cam is in, you then want to adjust the screw. And I would say with most boats, a good starting point for how much should you put the screw in, I would put it in so it's just a little bit. In fact, let's move the boat rather than the screw. So, so you've got just a little bit sticking out from the thread. This is exactly the same for the other type of rudder stocks that we use on the Hobiecats, the one with the open casting like this, like you'd have on a Hobie 18, Hobie 17, Hobie Tiger, and Hobie 20 as well, I think. Yeah, so just have it flush to start with. That's a good starting point. And then if you're sailing along and your rudders are kicking up all the time, that's a good sign that you want to just crank that up a little bit. So there we go. Hope that's all right, Willis. Hope that helps you to get your spring and screw and all of that installed. Do keep her well lubricated as well. Of course, some waterproof grease is going to keep things running nicely. You could also use, am I going to get shot down in flames if I say you could use a bit of Vaseline on there if you haven't got waterproof grease? I hope I'm not going to get shot down in flames. So there we go. All right, who else is checking in? All right, we've got Jens on board. Hi, Jens. Great to have you with us. Oh, with a dab. I've learned the dab from my 8-year-old. Got CBob64. Hello. Next season, I plan to use a spinnaker on the Hobie 16. It's been 20 years since the last time I used it. Is it possible to jibe and tack with the spinnaker up? Yes, yes, jibe, no tack. The spinnaker is definitely a sail that only wants to really be used on your downwind angles. So depending on what the wind strength is when you're flying a spinnaker, if it is super light wind is of course coming from the top of the board, standard. If it's super light wind, then you can fly the spinnaker on a close reach. I think it was in the Beijing Olympics that the Tornado fleet were basically using code 0 spinnakers, which are, it's the same as an asymmetric spinnaker, but just much flatter. And what they were doing was actually using these code 0 spinnakers on the upwind because the wind was so light that they could do it. And it just meant that they could get to the breeze a bit earlier than the boats that weren't flying them. But in normal situation, if you've got enough wind to get a bit of direction, so if you've got good steering, let's say, that's a good gauge of good wind. We're talking 5 knots. Things start happening at 5 knots. Then the beam reach is about as far upwind as you want to take the spinnaker. Any further up, and what you're going to get is the spinnakers at the front. No matter how hard you pull it in, it's going to start flapping. So you don't want, if you've got the spinnaker in as tight as possible, this is the way to gauge how close you can go in the light winds, is with the spinnaker in as tight as possible, take the boat up towards the wind. And if the front of the sail starts flapping and it's not going to stop flapping, you just need to bring it down a bit more until it fills. And that is as close to the wind as you can go. It might not be necessarily the most efficient. It's probably more efficient to come down a few more degrees, but that is as high as you can go. If it's a bit windier and you want to know how high you can go to the wind, then the whole boat is going to be really letting you know about that quite dynamically, because if you turn too close to the wind when there's a bit more wind, even 8 knots is enough, the windward hull will come out of the water. And if you don't, well, if you keep heading up, you're going to capsize, even in a relatively light wind. So this is why we're only jibing with the kite, because if we do try to tack with it, it is possible to tack with the spinnaker, but you don't want to. It's really bad technique. But from here all the way through to here on the other side, the spinnaker's going to be flapping. You're going to be dragging it really badly around the front of the forestay and the jib. You could tear it quite easily, and yeah, don't do it. It's just nasty. All right, but jibing, yes, definitely. The spinnaker really helps with the jibe because we can sail efficiently further downwind than we would do without the spinnaker. So our jibing angle is actually going to be much smaller than it would be with the spinnaker, which means we get to carry the speed through the jibe a lot easier. And the main technique point there is, as soon as the boom comes across and you're definitely through the jibe, then straighten up, sit down, look at where you're going and get settled before you start heading up anymore, so that you've definitely got control of the boat before you're putting the power on. There we go. All right, we got Yap on board. Hi, Yap. Great to have you with us. All right, we've got Scott with a good question. Why don't rudders come pre-drilled from Hobie? I would be nervous drilling into EPO3 rudders. Well, the rudder blades are drilled and bushed when they come from the factory. In Europe, I don't know what's going on in America, but in Europe, when you buy a rudder blade, it's got the holes in the right place for that type of boat, and she's ready to go. So I don't know who's not putting the holes in the rudder blades, but we want to know who. Maybe it was a Friday job and the guy wanted to knock off early and forgot when the rudder blade arrived. I would also be nervous drilling into EPO3 rudders. Although if you do put the hole in the wrong place, yes, it's a disaster because the rudder will never go down as it should do. This is why you can't interchange Hobie 16 and Hobie 18 rudders, because the holes are in a different place. So they'll never lock down correctly if you put them on the other type of boat. But if you did have holes in the wrong place in the rudders, for example, we did have, when we upgraded to the EPO rudder blades, we had a load of regular Hobie 16 rudder blades at Wildwind, and our Hobie Pacific fleet really needed some new rudder blades. So what we did is we filled in all the holes on the old ones, on the 16 blades, and then re-drilled them for the Pacifics, which have got the same as the Hobie 18 Classic. And there we were. All right, Johan 66, hello. A lot of wind here, 52 knots and 69 in the gusts. Wowzers. Crikey, that is a lot. Got Ernesto in El Salvador. Great to have you with us, Ernesto. Always nice to be hitting all the corners of the planet. Although I think anybody in New Zealand who's still up deserves a medal. Stephen says, one of my Hobie 16 cams doesn't rotate to the open position when lifting the rudder. Can't seem to fix it. One hit wonder. Can't fly a rudder. Would never get it down and locked. Yeah, if your rudder cam doesn't come back up when you lift the rudder, like if you did want to sail with one rudder at a time, it is usually, in theory, if it was all brand new, what it would mean is that you've got your screw too tight, and you should be able to just loosen the screw off a bit, and that should solve the problem. But in real life, as we all know, everybody who uses this system, that if you pull your rudders up by lifting the tiller arm, 9 times out of 10, the cam is going to stay in the wrong position, which means you can't lock it down again. So what are the solutions? I'd say one of the best solutions is the full service. Make sure that you basically take everything apart in your rudder stock, take everything out, get it all nicely cleaned, then lubricated again with some grease or something. And then make sure that the pin that holds the cam in, when you put it in, the cam can rotate freely on the pin, because that does have some effect. If the cam can't rotate freely on the pin like that, then that is one extra element that could stop the rudder cam from coming back up into the correct position. So if that is the case, don't drill out your cams, because you're going to regret that. Instead, in those pins that hold the cams in, they're like slotted pins, and you can close the slot by getting it on a hard surface, like something made of stone or metal, and just tap it with a hammer to close that gap. And then don't close it too much. Do a trial and error thing, couple of taps, stick it in, see if it rotates nicely, and then that might help. Yeah, it's a tough one. Also, one thing you could try is a little bit of technique. If when you're lifting your rudders, all right, let's just draw a line, and there's the rudder. If when you're lifting your rudders, you're lifting it by pulling this directly upwards, you're more likely to have an end result of an inverted cam every time, because you're not doing as much to flip the cam back over. Whereas if when you lift your rudders, if you kind of pull this in this direction, so up and forwards, this bit of forwards that you're pulling it is going to be catching in the nose of the cam for longer, and you're more likely to have a successful result. There we go. Yeah, it's a common problem, Stephen, and I feel your pain. Here at Wildwind, we have all of our rudders wound up pretty tight, because we only put the rudders up and down in the shallow water. We don't generally put them up out on the water. And the reason we want them down tighter is because every day we're out in 20, 25 knots of wind, and we want those bad boys staying down, even if somebody's giving it some juice. All right, we got Anthony. Hello, great to have you on board. I'm glad you could make it. All right, we've got Wyatt with some random letters. All right, here we go. Anthony says, have you ever thought of putting a chasing cam like those for paraglide in your cameras? Saw a cat guy on YouTube do that. Looked pretty cool. Not sure if it works well in light wind. I did actually, somebody suggested this to me, these chase cams. It's what it is like is the first thing that put me off actually is that they're ridiculously expensive. I thought that's a lot of money. What it looks like, if you're familiar with the sport of badminton, it looks like a shuttlecock, which there's a front to it, and then it's got like bits that stick out at this angle. So it's kind of like a cone designed for flight. And on this mount, your camera sits in here with the lens poking through here. And then there'd be a line, I can't remember exactly, it was a little while ago, a line that comes from there that goes to maybe the back of your mainsail or the end of your boom. What I thought was it's not going to be consistent enough on the boat. Because you've got to be moving forwards at a certain speed at all times to keep that bad boy in the air. So the idea is this will fly behind the boat attached by a very thin line, which hopefully you wouldn't be able to see too much in the picture. Yes, it would be extremely cool, but I think it would be a bit of a pain. But I would like to try just to see. But like when you jibe, if it is coming off the back of the sail, there's going to be some weird stuff going on. When you tack, the boat's going to stop and maybe go backwards a little bit if it's windy, which this is going to drop out of the sky. But yes, it would be great to try, but I don't fancy our chances too much. All right, we've got Ron on board, Hobie 16. What type of glue would I use to make it stiff? All right. Okay, I am guessing that you're talking about stiff rather than stiffening up the hulls, soft hull question, to stiffening up the whole thing. So there's the boat, pylon, casting onto the pylon, lovely, casting, then sidebar, front beam, and so on. So what the I think it's very popular in Australia to actually so what I believe that Ron is talking about here is gluing the boat together, so the castings are actually glued on to the pylons, making the boat incredibly stiff. This would be super quick because the boat would be like one unit that all moves as one. None of this kind of independent hull movement where you're losing a bit of energy. All of that energy, yes, says Ron. Thank you, Ron. All of that energy would be going towards making the boat go faster. What I believe the Aussie guys do is they use epoxy resin to glue the pylons to the castings, because epoxy resin is very strong. If I was going to do that, I would make like an epoxy resin paste using epoxy resin and some micro bubbles, like the tiny, it's probably the finest substance in the world. The actual grains of these little, don't even know what it's made of, really. Must be like tiny little bits of what fiberglass is made of, but absolutely tiny, smaller than sugar or even fine salt, or even grains of flour. And you just use that to thicken up the epoxy. And then I suppose you just take it off, paste it on, put masking tape on your pylons so you don't get too much seepage coming down, and whack it together, and then your boat is going to be as stiff as you like. Of course, you'll never ever be able to take it apart ever again, because epoxy is really, really strong and it will never break. Now, two reasons. Obviously, this is really going to make your boat it's going to put it up a level. But two reasons why I personally wouldn't do this is the first one, for the reason that you could never take your boat apart again. That's a shame. But the second reason is, if you know, the 16 has got a fair amount of flex to it, and if you're taking that flex out of this joint here, then we've got inside the hole where the pylon goes in, and I think they're mounted in a big block of foam with fiberglass and all sorts. So by not having this kind of bit of give in here, then it's more likely that we are going to upset stuff that's going on inside the hull, in my opinion. So we might start seeing a bit of movement in the pylon at the top of the hull, which would be really quite alarming. But I don't know. I'll have to speak to some of these Australian guys and see if they have that problem at all after a couple of years of having the boat glued together. What you can do is something slightly less committed than gluing, is to basically pack the joint between the space between the pylon and the casting. I know, especially slightly older 16s that have been around the block a few times, you're going to have quite a cavity between the two there, probably on one side. So if you get some like plastic, hard plastic material, like if you were to buy an what would come in that hard plastic, a probably an SD card, that sort of plastic, that's very hard, or even a bit of old detergent container, that kind of more softer plastic, but anything that you can get up that cavity and pack it out, that is going to reduce the amount of movement in there. I've also heard people using bits of old beer can to pack it out as well. I suppose everything works when it comes to packing it out. All right, at this stage in the game, 38 minutes, I'm just going to pause for a commercial break. That's for everybody who's watching later on, but no commercial break for everyone who's here live, of course. All right, so who else have we got on board? Not Ausgang. Hi. Hey to all, and greetings from Austria and the Blowjob crew. Yes, that's right. Not Ausgang's boat is the it was the Dart 18, wasn't it? Called with a really nice spray job, matching sprayed helmets as well. All right, we got Max on board. Oh, Bob 64, you're very welcome. All right, we got Max from Rosenheim, Germany, just tweaking in to say hello, riding my road bike, listening as far as there is Wi-Fi. Great stuff, Max. Take it easy. Keep your eye on the road. I've been doing a lot of cycling this week myself. I use Strava to log my mileage on the bike. And what I do every year as a little motivational booster is Strava have this thing called the February Climbing Challenge, where you have to do 7,500 meters in the month of February of altitude. And I'm getting close because I'm going away next week. It means I haven't got as much time. I'm actually going to cycle round the island of Lefkas tomorrow. So that's a lovely day out. Hopefully it'll be a nice day. All right. Anthony says, with the chase cam, they put it on the top of the mast. Okay, that would make a lot of sense. It would then not go into the water when you slow down. All right, we've got Tim Beecham in Clearwater, Florida. Yes, Tim, I was down at the post office today to send you a certificate, but post office was closed because there was a power cut. I'll have to try again on Monday. But great to have you on board. All right. We have got Office Hands Dave, who has stiffened his boat. Epoxy resin with filler. There are good YouTubes on that. Make sure you're ready to measure and hold your boat so that it's square. Take the trampoline off upside down and then use cargo straps for holding it in the right position. Yeah, I suppose that's a great reason for doing it, is because by gluing it, you can actually use slightly different amounts of glue on the different sides, pull it, manipulate the boat a bit while she's gluing, and actually make sure that your boat is running square. He says also make sure you leave a ventilation hole in the top of the pylon. Yeah, so before you actually glue it together, maybe it's worth just cleaning that hole out beforehand, because once it's done, it's done. Okay. Oh, Max said, just got a signal again to hit the like button. Okay, so if you'd like to hit the like button, that would be great. Thank you very much. It just means that more people get to see this later. So we're spreading the love of the catamaran sailing on the internet. I think it's very nice to hit more people. We got Fernando in Brazil tuning in. Great to have you with us, Fernando. Hope you're enjoying yourself, having a nice time, getting out for a sail, that kind of thing. Right, time for our next preloaded question. And this one comes from Sea Captain. He says, I've been sailing a Hobie wave for the past year. My first boat after kayaking for 20 plus years. Maybe this is information we don't need to know for the question. Oh, he's recently gifted a very used Hobie 16. Nice. He usually sails solo, and I'm thinking that sailing without the jib would be fast enough for the gusty winds. My question is, would using the main be less likely to capsize? And if I add foam to the mast, would that help from turtling? I think the answers there are yes, 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 and yes. All in that order. Yes, so we did some testing on this, because the thing with the Hobie 16 is when you don't have the jib up, there's no rig tension on the mast. So the mast just flops around, which you can't sail like that. So what we have to do, if we're going to sail without the jib, this is just going to be a quick picture here. Boat, bridle wire, forestay, mast, beam, and so on. Here's the hull, just to clarify there. Mainsail. That's pretty good, actually, for a fast picture. Marks out of 10. Yeah, so what we need to do, if we are going to sail without the jib, is somehow put tension onto the rig. So what I found to be the best thing is I actually used an old Hobie 16 bridle wire. The bridle wire is the wire that goes at the front there, which basically make a bridle like that, and then the forestay is there. So I used an old bridle wire, but a piece of good quality rope would do it, like a Dyneema based rope. And then so let's see what this rope is doing here. So we'd attach one end of the whatever we're using, but it wants to be about a meter and a half long, Depends on the length of your jib halyard, really. And you want to put it so that that's where your jib would usually go. And then onto the other end of this line, we're going to attach the jib halyard. So this is the jib halyard. There we go. And basically, you want to crank as much tension on here as possible to tighten up the rig. We want the rig to be a bit tighter than we would do if we were sailing with the jib, because when we don't have the jib, we want to bring the center of effort of the whole rig slightly further forwards. So the whole sail plan of the boat, the jib on a 16 is pretty big. So the center of effort would usually be about here. So we have, you know, as far as the whole rig goes, like here, because we've got some jib and quite a lot of main, maybe it would be back a little bit more. So when we take the jib off, that's going to go back more. So we want to bring the mast more upright. Really crank that bad boy on. Make sure that this rope that you're using is of a very high, low stretch, zero stretch, if possible. With the wire was definitely the best. So if you do have an old bridle wire, that is ideal. And then, yes, it does make it much less likely that you'll capsize if you're sailing solo. The main reason is because you've only got so many hands. You need one hand for the steering, one hand for the main sheet, which means that your jib will just be kind of doing what it wants. It won't be getting adjusted as much as when you're sailing with two people. So by losing the jib, it means that the jib isn't allowed, well, isn't going to be there trying to capsize you because you haven't got enough hands to uncleat it in a big gust. Yeah, that is the big reason, as well as, of course, losing that bit of extra sail area. The boat was really good fun to sail without the jib as well. Does require a little bit more technique on the tacking, but I'd say yes, yes, and yes. And does having foam on the mast, in the mast, make it less likely that you'll invert? Well, firstly, in theory, the mast should be sealed. So it should be full of air, which means that it shouldn't make a difference if you have foam inside the mast or not. So that shouldn't make a difference. But very important is that your mast doesn't leak. If your mast leaks and takes in water, it's going to invert very quickly. But maybe what you're saying is by putting foam on top of the mast, yes, that is definitely going to prevent the boat from inverting. Hobiecat do make a device for the top of the mast called, in England, we call it a masthead float, but in the States, it's called a baby bob. And that mounts really nicely to the top of the mast and it will stop it from inverting. So there we go. I hope that helps there, Sea Captain. All right, back to the live chat. Ron says, do you have a link to the video? I think that was from before, referring to, about the gluing the boat together video. If you have got a link there, Dave, if you could just pop that in the live chat, that would be great. All right, Fleet 240. Please explain the two-finger tiller touch and rudder alignment. Juicy. All right, not sure about the two-finger tiller touch. I'm guessing what that means is when your boat is set up nicely and you're sailing along, you may have experienced in the past when you're sailing along, especially if it's windy, your boat is constantly wanting to turn into the wind, and to stop it doing that, you're having to grip the tiller extension very tightly to hold your boat on the same course. So when I was working back in the day at Grafham Water, I was taught you should be able to steer the boat like you were holding your cup of tea, because we're English, you see. So yeah, 2 fingers on the tiller extension, that's as much as it should take. It's not all about the rudder alignment. It's also about the rudder rake. Rudder rake has a massive part to play. But if we first look at the alignment, if we have got our boat just here, seem to draw quite a lot of these, by the way. All right, let's do the rudder in a different color so we can see where the boat ends, the rudders start. 2 ways that we can do the rudder alignment. I've done a video on rudder alignment, which has got all the numbers in it, and for different types of boat as well. So check that out if you would like to. 2 ways of doing it. Before you do the rudder alignment, put the jib up, put the rig tension on the boat, because when you put the rig tension on, it pulls the bows of the boat in, which is going to slightly change the shape of the whole boat. So put the rig tension on first. And then the non-scientific way is just to have the rudders up on the beach like this, stand behind, make sure one of the rudders is running dead straight, and then look at the other rudder, and that wants to be just in slightly. Non-scientific, but the time when your rudder alignment is really going to affect you badly is if the rudders are out at all, like this, what we would call towing out. It's going to be absolutely horrible. Your boat is going to do some very strange things. It's going to be dangerous, because if you put the stick down, if you stop holding your tiller extension for a second, the boat might violently turn away from the wind. So not a great time. So what we want is the rudders towing in slightly. So that is bad. Good is in slightly, like that. And then to do it more scientifically is put the boat with the rig tension on, like we just said, put the boat on the trolley with the bows on the ground, so that we can lock the rudders down in position. And then we want to take a tape measure, measuring from the same distance from the tip. I'd suggest around 30 or 40 centimeters from the tip of the rudder blade. And we want to take a measurement at the front and then a measurement at the back at the same height. And the front one should be, I can't remember what the exact number is for a 16, but it's something like 8 mil or something. So the rudders are in by 8 millimeters on this measurement. But there is a video called Rudder Alignment, would you believe, where all the numbers are there. So that is stage 1 on this 2-finger steering thing. The other one is the rudder rake. So basically, we have we've largely got adjustment for how much we can pull the rudder in this way. And I've never come across a boat that didn't want the rudder as far in as possible. So if you want your steering to be lighter, just make sure that when the rudder's down, locked down, again, put the boat on the trolley. If you put your hand here and try pulling the rudder backwards, if it can move backwards at all so that space appears here, then you need to trim the rudder so it gets pulled in more, so that it absolutely can't move backwards. Because as soon as you start moving forwards with a little bit of load in the rudders, the blade's going to come back a bit. And it's when the blade is back, that is when your steering gets super heavy. Super heavy. Very heavy indeed. The other one is if your rudder is, if we look from the back, where can we put this? Oh, we're rudder's green. Remember that. If we look from the back like this, there's the rudder stock like this, not to scale. If your rudder blade can move from side to side, then that is also going to affect this light steering, because what's going to happen is if you're not going so quickly, you're not going to feel it so much. But when you start going pretty fast, if the rudder can go to the side, you're going to have a lot of pressure pushing it over, and you basically get a big bit of cavitation around the rudder blade, where you get air on one side and a big bubble on the other side, all sorts of weird stuff going on around the rudder blade, which does make it feel like someone's chucked a bucket off the back of the boat. It's like the brakes suddenly come on, you lose control, bad times. So to eliminate that movement, we need to look at the bushing on the rudder pin, and then we need to look at this gap in between the rudder blade and the rudder stock, so we can pad this gap out with some plastic. I've tried gluing rubber pads to the inside as well to reduce that, so that we're losing that sideways movement. So there we go. That is what I would do to make the boat feel as good as possible. If your rudders are absolutely dialed in and it's still heavy on the helm, the next two things that could be affecting the weight of the rudders, how heavy it is to steer, is either your rig tension, the tension you've got in the jib halyard, or in your trim, how far forwards or backwards you are on the boat. So sometimes if it's windy, if you have too much rig tension on, this can make the rudders feel a bit heavy. So just loosen off about that much jib halyard and she'll feel like she wants to go. Whereas if it's too tight, she won't want to go. She'll just be like, no, I'm not going. Also, if you're trapezing too far forwards, I know it sounds the wrong way round, but if you're trapezing too far forwards, digging the bow in too much, then the rudders aren't working correctly. So move back a little bit and just experiment with forwards and backwards movement on the boat, and that can help as well. Okay, I hope that helps. Quite an explanation now, I think you'll find. All right, we've got Mark and Janet on board from Ohio. Great to have you. Stephen says, if sailing the Hobie 16 gibless, should I let the side stay plates off to bring the mast forwards? I would. I'd keep the chain plates for the shrouds in the same position, but just make sure you've got plenty of rig tension on. It's only a small difference that we're doing, where if it was windy and we're sailing normally, we'd let off a bit of rig tension, like we're just saying, whereas just with the mainsail, we keep it cranked like that. All right, we've got Luca on board from Monte Cristi. Great to have you with us. Dominican Republic. Oh, yeah, as featured in Show Us Your Cat. Yeah, Luca, we are expecting some more from you with your absolutely amazing looking yellow boat looks so good. We need to see that bad boy in action. All right, Mark says, Joe was thinking about putting on a jib traveler trim kit on an older Hobie 16. If I'm not racing or spending a lot of time on the trapeze, would it be worth it? Yeah, I think it's a nice thing to do because it does mean that it's just nice having that system. You pull a rope, something moves. It just feels nice. It looks cool as well. But is it actually worth it if you're not racing? I'd say no, probably not. I'd say what makes a bigger difference is if you are not already upgraded in that department, is upgrading your downhaul to the 6-to-1. That makes a big difference to the actual sailing of the boat. Whereas the on the fly jib traveler, it's kind of like if it's windy, just set them all the way out anyway. And then if you are changing of sail, then it just takes you a couple of seconds for the crew to go and lift up the little plunger, slide it out, and there it is in the right position. So I'd say if you're not looking at getting around the course quicker, then I would keep it as it is. There was, I can't remember what his name was, but someone did a really nice job of fitting their own adjustable jib traveler system to their 16. So it was in a previous show, Cat, and we actually made a video using his boat of this system that he made, which was a lot less expensive, I'm sure, than getting a factory one on there. Not Ausgang says, can it be possible to break the boat by building wings that are too big? For example, when the wings go out 1 meter. Yes, I would say you probably could do some. You're going to be increasing the loads significantly by getting your weight further outboard. If you're sailing single-handed, putting the wings far out isn't going to be a problem. Or if you're not sailing in particularly strong wind, not a problem. But if you're going out in 20 knots or more of wind and you're trapezing off the wings and trying to go as fast as possible, you're going to be putting your boat under a lot of stress. Everything is going to have more stress on it than it was designed for. So there is a chance you could, I think, not Ausgang's boat is the Dart 18. I'm pretty sure it is. The Dart 18, what could you break? You could break the mast by overloading it. You could, and it's probably the mast, the rigging, and the rudder system. So where the rudder attaches to the back of the boat, that's going to be under a lot more load. So there's just more load everywhere. All right, we got Toot in Texas. Great to have you with us, Toot. All right, Mark and Janet say for sideways rudder movement, I've glued some rubber-backed patio carpet. Nice. Works great. Good to know. So rubber-backed patio carpet to go in this place here to take some of that movement out. Give it a try. Why not? All right. Toot says, should there be zero turbulence coming off the rudders? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you don't want any of this. You can now, if it was the question of should there be noise coming from the rudder blades, it is extremely common to have some sort of noise. And this isn't a byproduct of perhaps the rudders not being set up correctly, but it is actually this comes from the shape of the rudder blade where can we put this? So not particularly good picture, never mind. But if the back edge of your rudder blade comes to a really sharp point, that is going to be allowed to vibrate more. And it's those vibrations that create the noise. Of course, it's going to vibrate even more if it's not set up right. So if your rudder's coming back a bit, there's going to be more pressure there, more vibration. All right, Laura says a bit of rig tension is just half an inch, correct? I'd say you could go as much as an inch, 2 inches. All right, we've got confirmation, not our gang, Dart 18. Yes. All right, so on to the next preloaded question. I have to ask at this time, please no further questions because we've gone over an hour now. And still got a few of these to do. All right, Craig says, how do you guys store your sails in the off season? I've untied the battens, but have left them in the sail, rolled them up. Not very space efficient. Yeah, but it wouldn't be. All right, Craig's basically, just to put that question very simply, is how can you store your sails for a long period of time? Yes, definitely. If you're storing your sails for a long period of time, what would we do? We would untie all of the battens. Anybody who works on the Wildwind Beach would know that that is not necessarily true. Untie all of the battens, wash and dry the sail. Make sure that the sail is absolutely as dry as a bone before storing it. You want that to be very, very dry. If you're not going to untie all of the battens, certainly untie. And if it's something like an F18, definitely remove the top 3 or 4 battens, because that's when they start having a bit more angle to them. And if you leave those battens in, they'll twist, and that twist will be in. So there we go. But it's definitely better to loosen the battens off, and then just having the sail lying flat on the floor on a shelf or something. But it's definitely better to leave the battens in, leave the sail in its full, whatever you want to call that, length, rather than taking the battens out and folding the sail up, because those folds will become creases, which will be quite difficult to get out. It could, if it's an older boat as well with older sails, those creases could create weak points in the sail. All right. Not Our Gang says, do you have a good method, okay, to repair small holes in the trampoline caused of smoking? Oh dear. Yeah. For small holes in the trampoline, what I would probably do if I found some is take a piece of webbing, which is like the material that well, unless you happen to have a small piece of trampoline material, you might be able to get some trampoline material from a local sail maker who might just sell you an offcut or give you an offcut, and then take some whipping twine. This is like the thinnest, it's not rope, it's twine, but it's waxy. And then I would stitch a patch onto your hole. That would be what I would do for a small hole. All right. Stephen says, I say rudder hum is good. It's like, who wants an Aston Martin without the exhaust noise? It makes you happy. Nice. Oh, and Mark and Janet say, on the subject of storage of sails, watch out for mice. Very wise. Yeah, make sure where you store the sails isn't a place where things can get in. For us, it is definitely mice, rats, and other things that eat everything. Oh, we've got Dave with the topic of trampoline repair. Flex seal tape, small tramp holes, both sides, lasts years. That is really good to know, actually. I think we could do with some of that out here, Dave. All right. Dave also says, how about a link to the inflatable mast floats you use for the monohulls at Wild Wind? Solo Hobie guy who's afraid of turtling. Yeah, it's not a bad shout. Yeah, so like I said, on the catamarans, we use these baby bobs, which are like solid big lumps of plastic at the top of the mast. But what we use on our monohulls is we use the Crew Saver 40-litre masthead floats, which are like a bag. You inflate it like a life jacket, and then you would actually hoist it up with the sail. So when you attach the halyard to the top of the sail, you attach the bag of air as well and pull it up. That's what you do. Yeah, good shout there, Dave. Yeah, yeah, if whoever it was who asked the question, who was it? It was Sea Captain. If Sea Captain wants to drop me a message in the comments, then I will put a link to those Crew Saver masthead floats. Or if anybody wants to put a comment in the comments saying what's those masthead floats, I'll put one in there. They're definitely cheaper than the baby bobs as well, but they're not as durable. They are like a cloth sort of construction. All right, next and final question in the live chat. I don't know if Ryan's still there. It must be getting on for 6:30 in the morning now. So he's probably had a coffee. So he says, when I tighten my main sheet, when the traveller car is out a little bit, I can't get it block to block. When I tighten it, it actually pulls the traveller car back to the centre. Vernacra 500 manual calls for a split tail traveller line tied to the end of the main sheet, but I'm using a single line end through a single eye strap on the center of the back beam. Yes, so this is quite a common problem with any catamaran. Basically, the better the traveller car is, the more expensive the traveller car is, the more likely it is going to move. If you've set the traveller out a little bit, like here, there's the traveller, here's you on the trapeze. When you pull the main sheet in, there is a chance that rather than the main sheet going in, the traveller is actually going to move up towards the middle of the boat. So I think what's happening here is Ryan has moved from the Prindle to the Nacra 500, which is a more modern boat with more likely to have like a nice roller bearing traveller car on there. So what it can be a byproduct of the traveller moving to windward is you've actually set the traveller too far out. It means there's not enough pressure in the mainsail to hold it in that position while you're sheeting in. So if the traveller does come in when you try to sheet in, then perhaps try bringing the traveller in a bit anyway and sail with it in that position. But it's only actually the Hobie 16 where when you sheet in hard, you're getting the blocks so they're actually touching. On most other boats, I don't know any other boats where you actually get the blocks touching, but even when the sail is cranked, there'll be, the blocks will be this far apart, even when it's cranked. So I wouldn't be too worried about getting it block to block. What would be a good idea? Oh, Hobie 17 blocks touch. News just in. Thanks for that, Toot. What I would do is when you've got the boat on the beach, perhaps when there's not so much wind, mainsail up, main sheet attached, really crank the main sheet in as much as you can and just note a sort of rough idea of how much space there is between the blocks. And that's how you know that is the most main sheet tension we're ever going to have. There we go. All right, see you, Dave. Love not house gang handle. Yes, means emergency exit. Yeah, it's a very good name. All right. So yeah, so that is stage one. Check to see what your maximum main sheet tension is. And perhaps you're setting the traveler too far out for the amount of wind. If it's a light wind and you're setting the traveler out quite a long way because you're sailing downwind, then you want to have the main sheet quite loose anyway. The next part of the question was NACRA suggests having a split tail on the traveler control rope. You may be wondering what on earth is that. All right, so if this is the back beam, here is the traveler car. We'd usually have two rollers on the traveler car. So standard for the traveler is for just the rope to come through the middle, there to be like an eye strap here on the beam, rope comes through, figure of 8 knot, done, easy. But what has become popular, this started with the tornadoes, but it got passed down to pretty much everything else, Formula 18s, Formula 16, and then every other boat in the range would be looking at having this system as well, is a split tail on your traveler line. So this means that the end of your rope, if this is the rope, it would then go to two smaller ropes like this at the end. Now on my tornado, I got a guy in Italy to actually do this bit of splicing for me because it did seem a little bit involved. So I got this done so it had a split tail. And then the idea is that when you're pulling the traveler oh, sorry, I missed a bit. And then rather than having the single eye strap here, you have one here and one here. So let's the rope is now green. So then this split tail would come like this, and you'd have, while it's still two pieces, when you're pulling the traveler in as much as possible, while it's two pieces, the two pieces are going through the roller. And then what that is achieving is it's holding the traveler dead central. Because if you've just got the central standard traveler system, even when you've got it pulled in as tight as possible, because of this small amount of distance here, the traveler will move an inch or so to the side when you pull the main sheet in. So the split tail just holds the traveler car right in the middle. Now, is it worth doing? I would say it's only worth doing if you're racing. Because to be honest, when you're rigging the boat up, if you're taking the ropes and the main sheet off every time, you have to make sure you get these ropes tied off in exactly the right place. Otherwise, your traveler car is going to pull to one side or the other when you pull it in tight. So I would say if you're not racing, just the normal single in the middle is absolutely fine. And so when you're sailing upwind and you're not having to depower, you just crank the traveler line in as much as you could as normal, and that is fine. Yes, when you sheet in the main hard, it might just wobble a little bit, but it's not an issue. It's not going to affect your performance for the amount of effort and faff with the twin tail system. However, if you are racing, then the twin tails, it does mean that your traveler it's much more precise. You are going to gain a little bit, which sometimes that's all that you're looking for. On my Tornado, where we've got the split tails, I actually use a separate traveler line so that I can leave that attached to the boat the whole time, because you do have to tie it off accurately to make sure that's central. So there you go, Ryan. I hope that is a worthy explanation of your question there.